The night was quiet on the outer rim colony known as New Haven 3. Far from Earth, the stars above were brighter, and the wind often carried the scent of wild trees and damp soil. Jack lived alone in a small wooden house on the edge of the forest, surrounded by fields he had cleared with his own hands. He was not a hero, not a soldier, just a man who wanted peace and silence. But peace rarely lasted long on the frontier. That night, as Jack finished stacking firewood, the ground shook softly beneath his boots. He paused. A strange sound echoed in the distance like something crashing through the trees. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't wind. It was something else. Jack grabbed his old plasma lantern and walked toward the forest. The noise had come from the eastern hill. As he moved closer, he smelled burning metal. Smoke rose above the treetops. His eyes narrowed. He found it 10 minutes later. A wrecked pod, silver and scorched, half buried in the dirt. Branches were snapped, the trees around. It blackened from impact. Jack raised the lantern and moved slowly. Then he saw movement. A small hand pressed against the cracked glass of the pod's hatch. He stepped closer and froze. Inside was a woman, not human. Her skin was pale blue with a soft glow. Her eyes were large, golden, and full of fear. She held 2 small children close to her. They looked terrified. When she saw Jack, she pressed a button on the panel and the hatch opened with a soft hiss. The woman fell to her knees in the mud and looked up at him. I swear, she said in a shaky voice, to be submissive. My children, they are very well behaved. Please don't turn us in. Jack was speechless. He wasn't used to visitors, especially not from another species. The woman trembled. Her clothes were torn, her face tired. One child clung to her shoulder, the other hid behind her back. Jack looked at the wrecked pod, then back at the woman kneeling in front of him in the cold night. I'm not turning anyone in, Jack finally said. You're safe here, stand up. She looked surprised. Slowly, she rose to her feet, still holding one child tightly. Jack pointed toward the trees. Come with me. My house isn't far. Without another word, the alien woman followed him. The children stayed quiet just as she promised. They walked through the forest. The only sounds were the rustling leaves and the distant howls of night creatures. Jack didn't ask any questions. He could see they were in pain, and this wasn't the time to push for answers. When they reached his house, he opened the door and waved them in. The inside was simple: wooden floors, a small fireplace, shelves lined with tools and old books. You can rest here, Jack said. There's a spare room. It's not much, but it's warm. The woman bowed her head again. Thank you. Truly. I am Sayalari. These are my children, Rhinal and Mira. Jack nodded. I'm Jack. He fetched warm blankets and some dried food from his cabinet. Sayalari accepted it gratefully and helped her children eat. They looked hungry but didn't rush. They were gentle, polite, and quiet. Just like she said. Jack watched from a distance. He had lived on this planet for years and had never seen aliens up close, only on screens or through distant reports. But now one stood in his living room with 2 children. She had begged for safety, and he had given it without knowing why. After they ate, Sayalari tucked her children into the spare room's cot. They fell asleep quickly. She walked back into the main room and stood near the fire, staring into the flames. I will work, she said softly. I will clean, cook, anything. Just, please, let us stay for a few days. I won't cause trouble. Jack sighed. I didn't help you so you could serve me. You're not a slave. She looked at him confused, as if she had never heard those words before. You can stay, he added, until you heal. Then we'll figure things out. A tear rolled down her cheek and she quickly wiped it away. Thank you, Jack. I will not forget this. Jack turned away, hiding his own mixed thoughts. Something inside him had changed. He had planned to live a quiet life, alone, with no one to bother him. But now in one night that plan had been shaken, and though he didn't say it aloud, he knew this wasn't just some random event. Something was coming, and he had a feeling this alien woman and her children were running from something much bigger than just a broken ship. The morning sun shone through the windows of Jack's house. Outside, mist still floated over the fields, but inside, there was warmth from the small fire that had burned all night. Jack sat at the table, drinking his usual cup of bitter leaf tea. He looked toward the spare room door. It was quiet, too quiet. He walked slowly and pushed the door open just a little. Scifi and her 2 children were still asleep, curled up together on the cot. They looked peaceful now, not like the scared figures from the night before. Jack stepped back without waking them. As he cleaned the table, he thought about what had happened. He hadn't planned to bring strangers, especially alien ones, into his home. But there was something in Scifi's voice, something honest and full of fear. He had seen enough pain in his past life to recognize true desperation. Later that morning, Scifi stepped into the kitchen area. Her eyes looked clearer now, and she had tied her long hair back with a thin piece of cloth. She bowed her head slightly. "Thank you." "Again," she said. "I know we are trouble for you." Jack waved his hand. "You're not trouble yet, but I do want to know more. Who are you running from?" Scifi looked down for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Then she spoke slowly. "I am from the Virelian colony, far from here. My people. We are not all treated kindly. Those who break rules, or are different, are punished. My children are half-bloods. Their father was not Virelian. When the leaders found out, they came for us." Jack's eyes narrowed. "So you ran?" "Yes," she whispered. "I took a small pod and escaped. We were hunted. I hid, changed routes, but they followed. I landed here by accident. The ship was failing. I didn't mean to bring danger to your land." Jack crossed his arms. "That pod, it has a signal, doesn't it?" She nodded, afraid. "A distress signal. I didn't know it was still active." Jack stood up. "We need to shut that down. If someone tracks it, they'll find you, and they'll find me too." Scifi looked at him, worried. "Can you help me hide it?" Jack didn't answer right away. He wasn't a soldier anymore, but his hands still remembered how to fix machines and build traps. "Yes," he finally said. "We'll hide it. I'll take care of it." Later that afternoon, Jack and Scifi walked through the forest back to the crash site. The children stayed behind, playing quietly with old wooden toys Jack had carved long ago. They didn't speak much, but their calm behavior was surprising. At the crash site, the pod still gave off a soft hum. Jack opened a side panel and studied the wiring. "This tech is different," he said, "but I can work with it." Scifi watched nervously. "If you cut the wrong wire, it might explode." Jack gave a small smile. "Then let's hope I still have good hands." After nearly an hour, Jack disabled the beacon. The humming stopped. The lights dimmed. The pod was finally quiet. He took parts from the pod, loaded them into a sack, and covered the wreckage with branches and soil. "No one will find it now," he said. As they walked back, Scifi stayed silent, but once they reached the house, she turned to Jack. "You are different from the humans I was told about." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What were you told?" "That humans are selfish, unkind, and dangerous." She looked away. "But you helped us without asking for anything." Jack shrugged. "People talk too much. I only judge what I see." That night, over a simple meal of roasted roots and local bread, the children spoke for the first time. "Is this your house?" Reinl asked softly. Jack nodded. "Yes." "It's nice," Mira added with a small smile. Jack chuckled. "Thank you. I built it myself. Every piece." Scifi watched her children with relief. It was the first time they had looked relaxed, in weeks. After dinner, they helped clean up without being told. Jack noticed everything: the way the children listened, how respectful they were, how carefully Scifi moved around the house as if trying not to disturb anything. "You weren't lying," he said quietly to Scifi. "They really are well behaved." She smiled gently. "I raised them that way. In hiding, you have to be quiet, careful. kind. Jack looked at the stars through the window. You can stay longer. Just follow a few house rules. Scilarri bowed her head. Of course. But Jack's mind was still uneasy. Even with the beacon off, he felt something wasn't over. He didn't know when or how, but he sensed that someone out there was still looking for them. And if they came, Jack knew he wouldn't run. Days passed and life on Jack's farm began to feel almost normal again, but different in quiet ways. The mornings were peaceful. Scilarri would wake up early and prepare breakfast, always careful, to use the ingredients Jack allowed. The children helped too, folding blankets, sweeping the floor, and sometimes even helping Jack in the garden. Reinl asked questions about the soil and how vegetables grew. Mira liked to follow the chickens and giggle when they clucked loudly. Jack had to admit, his home felt warmer with them there. Scilarri stayed busy. She cleaned, cooked, and helped with repairs around the house. But she never acted like a servant. She moved with quiet purpose and dignity. Jack noticed this and respected her for it. He never asked her to do anything, she simply wanted to. One afternoon, as Jack repaired the fencing near the edge of his land, Scilarri walked up holding a small basket. Lunch, she said softly. Jack wiped sweat from his forehead and sat down on a log. Inside the basket was flatbread, cooked roots, and sliced fruit. It was simple but filling. You didn't have to bring it all the way out here, he said. You work hard. You deserve it, Scilarri replied, sitting beside him. For a few moments they sat in silence, listening to the wind move through the tall grass. Jack glanced at her. You seem more relaxed now. Scilarri looked at the sky. For the first time in many years, I feel safe. Jack nodded slowly. Good. But I need you to be honest with me, Scilarri. Are you sure no one else is tracking that pod? I turned off the main beacon, she said. But there is something else. A backup signal. Very weak. I couldn't reach it in time before the crash. Jack stood up and stared toward the tree line. Then we might have company soon. Scilarri's face grew serious. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring danger here. Jack shook his head. Don't be sorry. You didn't choose this. But if someone's coming, I'd like to be ready. That evening, Jack went down into the basement, a place he rarely visited. He unlocked an old cabinet and opened a dusty case. Inside were a few tools, a tracking scanner, and a handheld signal jammer. Leftover gear from his younger days when he worked as a mechanic on a deep space transport team. He powered up the scanner. The screen blinked. A faint signal, very faint, pulsed from the direction of the hidden pod. Jack's jaw tightened. He walked outside and circled the property. The sun had already set, and the forest shadows were long and silent. Still, Jack moved like he used to in the past, calm, watchful. When he returned, Scilarri was tucking the children into bed. Is everything okay? She asked. There's still a signal, Jack said. It's weak, but if someone out there is looking hard enough, they'll find it. Scilarri lowered her eyes. What should we do? Jack folded his arms. We hide the pod better. And tomorrow I'll build something to throw off the signal. Make them chase the wrong direction. Scilarri looked at him in surprise. You'd do that? For us? Jack nodded. You're not the first to come here looking for peace. And I don't like bullies, even if they come from another planet. The next day, Jack and Scilarri worked together to move debris and better camouflage the pod. Jack dug out a trench and buried the last pieces of tech deep in the soil. He attached a device to the remaining signal core that would redirect the location signal 50 kilometers to the north. Anyone who comes, he said, will be looking in the wrong forest. Scilarri watched him closely. You know how to fight, don't you? I know how to prepare, Jack replied. Meanwhile, the children were playing in the field, chasing each other around an old scarecrow. Mira had picked a flower and was trying to braid it into her brother's hair. Jack smiled faintly as he watched them. Later that evening, as they all sat together for dinner, Scilarri finally asked something she had kept inside for days. Why? Did you really help us, Jack? You could have turned us away, it would have been easier. Jack looked at her, his eyes calm but serious. Because I was once on the run too. Not from soldiers, but from my past. From people who only cared about rules and power. I came here to be free. And when I saw you in that pod, I knew you were looking for the same thing. Sailari looked down, her eyes wet. Thank you. Not just for the shelter, but for treating me like a person. You don't have to bow or ask to serve, Jack said quietly. This is your home too now. Outside, the wind picked up, and far in the distance, a faint flash of light appeared in the night sky. Something entering the atmosphere. Neither of them saw it. But trouble was coming. The next morning felt different. The sky was cloudy and the birds in the forest were quiet. Jack stood on his porch holding his scanner. The signal from the hidden pod had changed. It was no longer just a weak pulse. It had been touched by something. Someone was close. Jack didn't say anything at first. He calmly went inside, where Sailari was preparing breakfast and the children were drawing pictures on scraps of paper. I need to go out for a while, Jack said. Sailari looked up. Is everything okay? Not yet, he answered. But it will be. Just stay indoors. Don't open the door unless I return. She nodded, trusting him without question. Jack walked to the old barn behind his house. It looked broken from the outside, but inside it was strong. He had stored a few useful things over the years, scrap metal, old machine parts, and tools he hadn't used since his early workdays in space. Now, they had a purpose again. Using spare panels and batteries, Jack built a fake signal box. It would copy the beacon signal from the pod and broadcast it stronger, but from far away near the rocky cliffs in the north. If the hunters were tracking the pod, they would go there instead. By late afternoon, he had it finished. He packed it into a crate and loaded it onto his hover cart. Then he set out alone, following an old forest path that led to the highlands. Hours beyond. Later, the device was in place. Jack activated it and the signal blinked brightly on his scanner. His plan was working. Now anyone watching would think the escape pod was far from the real location. As the sun began to set, Jack returned home. Sailari met him at the door. You were gone long. I needed to make sure no one finds you, he said. If someone's coming, they'll go the wrong way. She looked at him with concern. You're risking too much. Jack shook his head. I'm doing what's right, and I don't scare easy. That night, Jack cleaned and checked his old tools. He sharpened metal rods, set traps around the edge of his land, and reinforced the gate. Sailari watched him with careful eyes. You've done this before, she said. Jack nodded. Long ago, during the supply wars, I wasn't a soldier, but I saw enough to know how to survive. She looked at him with new respect. You're more than a farmer. I just want peace, he replied. But if someone tries to take it, I'll stand in their way. In the days that followed, everything felt calm, but underneath the surface, both Jack and Sailari knew something was near. One evening, as the children played quietly by the stream, Sailari sat beside Jack near the edge of the porch. I want to tell you something, she said. Jack looked over. Go ahead. In my world, women like me, we are not allowed to speak freely. We are trained to obey. We are told that our only worth is in serving others. She paused. That's why I said what I did when we first met. Jack nodded. I figured as much. But here, she continued, you never asked me to kneel, you never shouted, you just helped. You didn't need to earn kindness, Jack said. You already deserved it. Tears filled Sailari's eyes, but she smiled. Thank you. Before either of them could say more, a beep came from Jack's scanner. He grabbed it quickly. A small ship had entered New Haven 3's atmosphere. It wasn't a cargo ship or colony transport. It was a tracker-class vessel. Fast, armed, and dangerous, Jack stood. They're here. Sailari's face turned pale. How long do we have? Maybe an hour. He turned toward the house. Get the kids inside. Keep the lights off. No noise. She didn't argue. She rushed to gather Rinell and Mira. Jack went to his hidden supply box, pulled out a short-range energy trap, a motion sensor, and a long metal staff, his old defense tool from his work crew days. He placed the devices at key points around the yard, behind trees and near the edge of the trail. As night fell, the forest became silent. Jack stood at the edge of his porch, eyes fixed on the sky. Then, in the distance, he saw it. A dark shape, descending, almost silent. It hovered just above the ground before landing with a soft thump. Lights blinked. The ship's door opened. 4 figures stepped out, wearing dark armor. Their eyes scanned the forest. Bounty hunters. Jack didn't move. Not yet. They would come, and when they did, he would be ready. The night had fallen completely, and the air felt thick with tension. Jack stayed still on the porch, his eyes never leaving the ship in the distance. The bounty hunters had arrived. They moved quickly, their steps careful as they began scanning the surroundings. Jack knew they were looking for something, or someone, and he knew they wouldn't leave until they found it. The lights from their ship illuminated the edge of the forest, casting long shadows over the ground. Jack's heart beat steady in his chest as he waited. He wasn't sure how many there were, but he knew that he couldn't let them get any closer. His hand rested on the energy trap hidden beside the porch. The trap was simple, designed to stun anyone who triggered it. It was enough to give Jack a chance to make a move. Inside the house, Sailari had locked the doors and drawn the curtains. Rinell and Mira were sitting quietly in the corner, their small faces full of fear. She had told them to stay hidden, and they listened without a word, but Sailari couldn't stop glancing out the window, hoping Jack would come back inside soon. The uncertainty was too much to bear. Jack took one last look at the hunters as they moved closer. He saw them spread out, making a wide arc around his property. He could hear them muttering to each other, their voices low and cautious. They were looking for signs, footprints, broken branches, anything that might lead them to the wrecked pod. Jack's fingers curled around the staff he had taken from his old supply kit. It was made of reinforced metal, tough enough to withstand the harshest blows. He had learned how to fight with it long ago, when survival meant more than just staying alive. He wasn't a fighter, but he knew how to defend himself, and tonight he would need every skill he had. The first hunter stepped onto the clearing near the porch, just a few feet from the energy trap. Jack held his breath, waiting for the perfect moment. When the hunter took another step, Jack pressed the button on his device. A loud hum filled the air, and a bright blue light shot out from the trap, surrounding the hunter's legs. The hunter froze, unable to move. Jack's heart raced as he grabbed the staff and ran toward the stunned hunter. The others hadn't noticed yet. He moved quickly, coming up behind the first one. With a swift motion, he knocked the hunter's weapon out of his hand, then used the staff to knock him unconscious. The other 3 hunters turned toward the sound, but it was too late. Jack was already on the move, charging toward them with his staff raised. The second hunter reacted first, pulling out a blaster, but Jack dodged to the side, using the staff to deflect the shot. He wasn't aiming to hurt them, just to disable them long enough to send them running. The third hunter tried to flank Jack, but Jack anticipated the move. He sidestepped and swung the staff, knocking the weapon from the hunter's hand. With a quick strike to the chest, Jack sent him stumbling backward into the trees. The last hunter, seeing his team scattered and injured, hesitated for a moment before turning to flee. Not so fast, Jack muttered to himself. He threw a small rock at the ground behind the hunter, making a loud noise. The hunter spun around in confusion, and Jack rushed forward, tackling him to the ground. The two struggled briefly before Jack pinned him down. "You're not going anywhere," he said calmly, pressing his knee into the hunter's back. The hunter struggled under him, but Jack held firm. "You've been looking for something, but it's not here anymore." The hunter laughed bitterly. "You think this will stop us? You don't know who we work for." Jack's jaw tightened. "I don't care." He stood up and pulled the hunter to his feet. He could hear the other two hunters groaning nearby, still recovering from the stun trap. The first hunter was still unconscious, lying on the porch. "You're leaving. And you're telling anyone else who comes that there's nothing here," Jack said firmly. The hunter shook his head. "You're making a mistake." "I don't make mistakes," Jack replied coldly. "Now go." With a final glare, the hunter turned and retreated into the forest, signaling the others to follow. They didn't look back. Jack stood there for a moment, catching his breath. The danger had passed for now. The bounty hunters were gone, but Jack knew it wouldn't be the last time he'd see them. There would be others. There always were. He turned and walked back to the house. Sailory was waiting at the door, her face pale but filled with relief when she saw him. "Jack, you did it," she said, her voice trembling. "I had to," he replied quietly, looking back at the darkened forest. "I'll keep you safe, Sailory. You and your children." Sailory stepped forward, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," Jack said, his voice firm but soft. "Just stay safe. That's enough for me." Inside the house, the children were still huddled in the corner, their eyes wide with fear. Jack smiled at them, trying to calm them. "It's over now," he said gently. "They're gone." Rhinal and Mira slowly came out from their hiding place, their faces still uncertain, but the fear had lessened. Jack went to them, kneeling down to their level. "You're safe now," he said. "And I'm here." Sailory walked up behind Jack, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're not just a farmer, Jack, you're a protector." Jack didn't respond. He just looked out the window, watching the last traces of the hunter's ship disappear into the night sky. There was peace for now, but Jack knew it wouldn't last long. He had to be ready for whatever came next. The days that followed the hunter's departure were filled with a strange sense of calm. The forest around Jack's home remained quiet, and the usual sounds of birds and wind returned. But deep inside, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was still coming, something bigger than the small group of bounty hunters, the ship that had landed, the way the hunters moved with precision, and their cold words. They hadn't been acting on their own. There was someone else behind them, someone powerful, and Jack was certain they wouldn't give up so easily. Sailory noticed the change in Jack. He wasn't as relaxed as before, and he spent more time outdoors, scanning the horizon, checking his traps, and keeping a careful eye on the forest's edge. He rarely spoke about it, but Sailory understood. She too felt the weight of uncertainty, the fear that her past wasn't done chasing her. One evening, while the children played with some toys Jack had made for them, Sailory sat beside him on the porch. The sky was a mix of orange and pink, as the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows across the land. "Jack," she said softly, "I know you've been worried. About us, about them. You don't have to protect me alone." Jack turned to her, surprised by her words. "I'm not alone. You've helped more than you know." Sailory shook her head. "I don't just mean that. I can help you too. I'm not just someone to hide away." Jack looked at her, seeing the determination in her eyes. "I know that, but I'm the one who brought you here. It's my responsibility to keep you safe." She placed her hand on his. "And it's mine too. We're in this together, Jack. You've done so much for me, for my children. But I want to give back. I can fight if I need to. I know how to survive." Jack considered her words. It had never occurred to him to think of her as anything but a mother in need of protection. But now, he realized he had underestimated her. She wasn't just a victim. She was strong. And more than that, she had a fierce love for her children. That made her dangerous in her own way. "You've already given us something," Jack said quietly. "You've given us peace." "I haven't given you enough," she replied. "Not yet." Jack nodded. He knew what she meant. He had done his best to protect them. But the truth was, they weren't safe as long as the signal was out there. As long as someone knew they were here, They would never be free. The next morning, Jack woke early, as he always did. The first light of dawn filtered through the trees, casting soft shadows on the ground. He stretched, then made his way to the barn where he kept his tools. Scifi followed him, her eyes alert. "You've been thinking again," she said. Jack didn't answer immediately. Instead, he went to a shelf in the barn and pulled down a heavy box. Inside were old schematics, maps of the land, and bits of equipment that he had used over the years. He started sorting through them, muttering. To himself, Scifi stepped closer. "What are you planning?" "I can't stay here forever," Jack said, looking up at her. "We need to leave. I've been thinking of a place somewhere far away from here, but I need to know more about your people. If we're going to get away safely, we need to know what we're up against." Scifi's expression softened. "You don't have to go so far. I'm not asking you to risk everything. We can stay here." Jack shook his head. "I can't. I promised you I'd protect you, and I'm not just going to hide, not anymore." Scifi studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed and nodded. "You're right. We'll need to be prepared." For the next few days, they worked together. Jack gathered materials and prepared his equipment, while Scifi shared what she knew about the Virilan people, their leaders, their technology, and their reach. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Jack to start making a plan. She told him about their society, how the Virilan people were ruled by a strict council. The most powerful members of the council were cruel, unyielding, and determined to keep their world in control. They didn't care for those who were different, like Scifi and her children. To them, she was an outcast, a disgrace, and that was why she had to run. "I never thought I would leave," she said quietly one evening. "But I had no choice. They would have taken my children, forced them into a life I could never accept." Jack listened carefully, realizing just how much she had sacrificed. She had done what any mother would do. She had fought for her children's future no matter the cost. "We'll find a way," Jack said. "Together." That night, as they sat by the fire, Jack looked up at the stars. The sky was clearer than he had ever seen it, the stars bright and steady in the cold air. He felt a strange calm wash over him, knowing that no matter what happened next, he wasn't alone. Scifi sat beside him, watching the sky with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked softly. Jack turned to her, his face serious. "Every day," Scifi smiled. "Then we'll build it. A future where we don't have to hide anymore." Jack nodded, knowing that together they could face whatever came next. The world outside their small home might be dangerous, but for the first time in a long while, Jack believed that, with Scifi and her children by his side, they could overcome anything. The days moved quickly after Jack and Scifi made their decision. They worked together to prepare for whatever might come next. Jack had started digging deeper trenches around the property and laying out simple but effective defenses, while Scifi learned how to use some of his old tools. Despite her past, she had an innate skill for fixing things, something that Jack admired greatly. The children, Rinel and Mira, had grown fond of the farm, and Jack had grown fond of them. They spent their days playing in the fields, exploring the forest, and helping with small chores. Jack even found himself enjoying their laughter more than he expected. The quiet, peaceful life he had once craved was slowly becoming a memory, replaced by something much fuller, much more meaningful. One afternoon, Scifi walked up to Jack while he was working on the fence near the western edge of the property. The sun was setting behind her, casting a golden glow around her silhouette. "Jack," she called softly. He turned to face her, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "What's up?" She hesitated for a moment before speaking, her voice gentle but serious. "We need to talk." Jack put down his tools, sensing the change in her tone. "All right, what's on your mind?" "I've been thinking about what you said about leaving, finding somewhere far away." She paused, her eyes meeting his. "I don't want to run forever. I don't want to be constantly looking over my shoulder, always waiting for someone to come after us." Jack nodded, understanding her concerns. They had both been running from something, her past and his own choices. "I get it," he said, "but if we stay here, it's only a matter of time before they find us. I can't let that happen. I can't let them hurt you, or your children." Sailari sighed, lowering her gaze for a moment. "But what if we don't have to run? What if we fight?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "Fight? We don't have an army. We don't even have the resources." She smiled slightly. "No, but we have each other, and we have the land. We can make it work." Jack was quiet for a moment. He had always been someone who avoided conflict, who found peace in the quiet of his land. But as he looked at Sailari, at the determination in her eyes, he knew she was right. They didn't have to run anymore. They could stand their ground. "We can't do it alone," Jack said slowly. "But together, maybe we can." Sailari's eyes softened. Together. The following days were a blur of preparation. Jack and Sailari worked from dawn to dusk, setting up a series of defenses and traps, fortifying their home and gathering supplies. The children helped where they could, gathering firewood and cleaning the house. Jack had also reached out to a few of his old contacts, people who owed him favors or who might be able to lend a hand if things went south. Jack had never expected this life, this family, to be his. But the more he worked alongside Sailari, the more he realized that he had never truly been alone. There was something in her, something fierce and protective that mirrored his own desire for freedom and safety. One evening, after a long day of work, Jack sat by the fire, watching the flames dance. Sailari sat beside him, and the children played nearby, their laughter ringing through the air. It was peaceful, more peaceful than Jack had ever known. "I never thought I'd find this," Jack said quietly, his voice low. Sailari turned to him, her face soft in the firelight. "What do you mean?" "This," he said, sweeping his hand around the farm. "A family, a purpose. I thought I was just looking for peace, but I found something more than that." Sailari smiled, the warmth in her eyes filling him with a sense of belonging. "We found it together. It's not perfect, but it's ours." Jack nodded, his heart lighter than it had been in years. For the first time, he felt truly at home. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. The E. Next morning, the children ran up to him with excitement. "Look, Jack, look what we found," Reinl shouted, holding up a small bundle of wildflowers. Mira grinned. "We picked them just for you." Jack laughed and took the flowers from them. "Thank you. These are beautiful." Sailari watched them, with a smile, her heart full. "You've really become part of this family," she said to Jack, her voice full of warmth. "You know that, don't you?" Jack looked at the children, then at Sailari. "I do. And I'm not going anywhere." That afternoon, Jack and Sailari went over their plans again, double-checking everything. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes. But as they worked together, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they had already won. They had built something, here, something worth fighting for. As the day drew to a close and the last light of the sun faded behind the hills, Jack stood outside looking out at the horizon. The world was still a dangerous place and there were more battles to come. But for now, he had everything he needed. Sailari came up beside him, standing silently for a moment before speaking. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" she said. Jack nodded. "We have." She smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "And we'll keep going. Together." Jack smiled back, his heart full. He had found peace, and now he had a family. They would face whatever came next, side by side, together.